Well, hello there. If you are anything like me, you already know that The Thorn Birds is one of the most breathtaking and emotionally devastating miniseries ever committed to television. A love story so grand, so forbidden, and so achingly beautiful that it has never truly left us. 43 years have now passed since that unforgettable April night in 1983, when audiences across the world sat glued to their screens, hearts in their throats, watching the red Australian dust swirl around Drogheda. So, today let us pull up a chair and journey back together to revisit the entire cast, then and now, and find out what has become of the remarkable men and women who brought Colleen McCullough's masterpiece to life. 1. Richard Chamberlain, Father Ralph de Brissassar. Richard Chamberlain was born on March 31st, 1934, in Beverly Hills, California. He played the character Father Ralph de Brissassar in the miniseries when he was 49 years old in 1983. And today, in 2026, he is living at the remarkable age of 91. There are performances that define an actor, and then there are performances that define an era. Richard Chamberlain's portrayal of Father Ralph, the charming, tormented, heartbreakingly ambitious Catholic priest who loved God, the church, and Maggie Cleary all at once, and could not fully surrender to any of them, is undeniably one of those rare, once-in-a-generation achievements. He carried the impossible contradictions of Ralph de Brissassar with a grace and a sorrow that made you want to shake him by the shoulders and weep for him at the very same time. Chamberlain had already proven himself as television's beloved Dr. Kildare in the 1960s, but the Thorn Birds elevated him to something altogether different, a dramatic heavyweight, a brooding romantic icon who could hold the screen for 4 full nights and leave audiences absolutely shattered. His Golden Globe win for the role was richly deserved. Born George Richard Chamberlain, he grew up in Beverly Hills and attended Pomona College before studying at the Los Angeles Conservatory of Music. After military service, he moved to New York to pursue theater, which would remain a deep and abiding passion throughout his life. His stage work, including a lauded Hamlet in London's West End, confirmed what television audiences already sensed. This was an actor of rare and serious gifts. In his 2003 memoir, Chamberlain publicly came out as gay, an act of personal courage that earned him widespread admiration. He has lived a life of extraordinary richness, as an actor, a painter, a lover of classical music, and a deeply private man who has always seemed to know exactly who he is, even when his most famous character did not. Now, 91 years old, Richard Chamberlain remains a true legend of the screen. It's 2. Rachel Ward, Maggie Cleary. Rachel Ward was born on September the 12th, 1957, in Cornwall, near Chipping Norton, Oxfordshire, England. She played the character Maggie Cleary in the miniseries when she was 26 years old in 1983. Today, in 2026, she is living happily at the age of 68. Is there a more perfectly cast actress in the history of television than Rachel Ward as Maggie Cleary? The copper-haired, luminously beautiful English actress brought to Maggie something very few could have managed. A quality of longing so transparent, so genuinely felt, that watching her was almost uncomfortable in its intimacy. She made you believe, completely and without reservation, that this woman had loved this one man across her entire life and would continue to love him long after the camera stopped rolling. Ward came to acting after a successful international career as a fashion model, appearing on the covers of the most prestigious magazines in the world. Born into British aristocracy, her mother was the daughter of the 7th Earl of Dudley. She was raised with an ease and elegance that translated effortlessly onto the screen. Her film debut in the thriller Sharky's Machine in 1981 announced her arrival in Hollywood with considerable force, and The Thorn Birds, just 2 years later, made her a genuine star. She would go on to star in films including Against All Odds in 1984 and How I Live Now in 2013, as well as an impressive body of Australian film and television work following her marriage to the great Australian actor Brian Brown, her co-star from The Thorn Birds. Ward has also distinguished herself as a writer and director, with her 2010 Australian film Beautiful Kate earning considerable critical praise. Now 68 years old, Rachel Ward is a woman of immense and varied talent, an actress, a filmmaker, a writer, and by all accounts, a deeply thoughtful and creative soul. She and Brian Brown have been together for over 4 decades, and there is something quietly wonderful about knowing that the love story behind the love story turned out rather better than the one in the script. 3. Barbara Stanwyck, Mary Carson. Barbara Stanwyck was born Ruby Catherine Stevens on July 16, 1907, in Brooklyn, New York. She played the character Mary Carson in the miniseries when she was 76 years old in 1983. Sadly, Stanwyck passed away on January 20, 1990, at the age of 82 from congestive heart failure and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, California. Let us pause here and simply appreciate what it means that Barbara Stanwyck was the woman they chose to play Mary Carson. At 76, stepping in front of the cameras for what would prove to be one of her final and finest performances, Stanwyck brought to the aging, wealthy, bitterly amorous matriarch of Drogheda a ferocity and a wounded pride that only a lifetime of mastering the craft could produce. Her scenes with Chamberlain crackle with electricity, a dangerous, sardonic wit coding something much rawer and more painful underneath. She was simply magnificent. Born in Brooklyn and orphaned at the age of 4, Ruby Stevens endured a difficult childhood before reinventing herself completely and ascending to the very summit of Hollywood. Her career spanned 6 decades, encompassing some of the most iconic performances in American cinema: Double Indemnity, Stella Dallas, Ball of Fire, The Lady Eve. She was nominated for the Academy Award 4 times, and in 1982 received an honorary Oscar in recognition of a career of supreme artistry. The Thorn Birds arrived shortly after that honor, and she proved immediately that the Academy had not been paying tribute to a relic. They had been saluting someone who was still fully, brilliantly alive. Her Golden Globe win for the Thorn Birds was a fitting crown on a truly extraordinary career. Barbara Stanwyck left us in 1990, but she left behind a body of work so vast and so dazzling that she will never really be gone. 4. Christopher Plummer, Archbishop Vittorio de Contini Vercese. Christopher Plummer was born on December 13, 1929, in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He played the character Archbishop Vittorio de Contini Vercese in the miniseries when he was 54 years old in 1983. Sadly, on February 5, 2021, Plummer passed away peacefully at his home in Connecticut at the age of 91. There was something effortlessly celestial about Christopher Plummer stepping into the robes of an archbishop. He possessed, throughout his entire career, a natural nobility, a precision of speech and bearing that suggested a man permanently comfortable in rooms where great things were decided. His Archbishop Vittorio is the chess player who sets the entire tragedy in motion, and Plummer plays him with a silken, knowing authority that makes you understand completely how Ralph de Bricassart was both mentored and maneuvered. Plummer was, by virtually universal agreement, one of the greatest actors of the 20th century. Born Arthur Christopher Orme Plummer, he was a titan of both stage and screen, a celebrated Hamlet in Iago, an Oscar winner at 82 for beginners, making him the oldest competitive Oscar winner in Academy history at the time. He was Captain Von Trapp, General Chang, Leo Tolstoy, and 100 other unforgettable characters across a career spanning 7 remarkable decades. His autobiography, In Spite of Myself, is as elegant and witty as the man himself. Christopher Plummer left us in February 2021. The world of drama lost one of its great pillars, and the loss is still felt. 5. Gene Simmons, Fiona Fee Cleary. Gene Simmons was born on January 31, 1929, in Islington, London, England. She played the character Fiona Fee Cleary in the miniseries when she was 54 years old in 1983. Sadly, Simmons passed away from lung cancer at her home in Santa Monica, California, on January 22, 2010, just 9 days before what would have been her 81st birthday. Fee Cleary is one of the most difficult roles in the entire miniseries, and it is difficult for a reason that is not immediately obvious. The challenge is not to do more. It is to do less. Fee is a woman who has locked her deepest self away behind a wall of grief so old and so thoroughly constructed that she can no longer remember quite how to dismantle it, even for the children who need her and the husband who loves her with a patience that never runs out. She is present in every scene and yet somehow always slightly elsewhere, and the actress playing her must communicate an entire interior world of loss and longing while revealing almost nothing on the surface. That is an extraordinarily demanding technical and emotional task, and Gene Simmons accomplished it with a mastery so complete and so unobtrusive that you might almost mistake it for effortlessness. Her Fee Cleary is a performance built from the smallest possible materials, a glance held a fraction of a second too long, a stillness in the hands that suggests something being carefully held in, the faintest shadow of an expression that crosses her face and disappears before you can quite name it. She communicates decades of buried heartbreak through the merest flickers of her extraordinary instrument, and the cumulative effect is utterly devastating. By the time the miniseries reaches its later hours and Fee's interior world begins, painfully and haltingly, to crack open, Simmons has laid such careful and patient groundwork that the emotional release feels not just earned, but inevitable, like watching a dam finally give way after years of silent, invisible pressure. What makes this achievement all the more remarkable is the company it keeps in Gene Simmons' career, because her career was one of the most dazzling in the history of cinema. She was barely 17 years old when she appeared opposite Laurence Olivier in Hamlet in 1948, and her performance was so luminous and so assured that it earned her an Academy Award nomination before she was old enough to have lived much of the life she was already so gifted at portraying. That early promise was not a fluke, and it was not squandered. She went on to star in Great Expectations, Guys and Dolls, Spartacus, and Elmer Gantry, moving between genres and registers with a fluency that marked her as genuinely, completely exceptional. She was beautiful in the way that very few people are beautiful, not merely in appearance, but in some quality of presence that the camera loved unconditionally and audiences felt in their bones. Ask Richard Kiley, Patty Cleary. Richard Kiley was born on March 31st, 1922, in Chicago, Illinois. He played the character Patty Cleary, the patriarch of the Cleary family, the man whose dream of Drogheda sets the entire story in motion. In the miniseries, when he was 61 years old, in 1983, sadly, Kiley passed away from a rare bone marrow disease on March 5, 1999, at Horton Hospital in Middletown, New York. He was 76 years old. There is a particular kind of grief that attaches itself to the loss of actors like Richard Kiley, actors who specialized in goodness, in decency, in the quiet, non-glamorous heroism of ordinary men trying to do right by the people they love. We do not always celebrate those performances as loudly as we celebrate the villains and the firebrands and the tortured romantics, but we feel their absence more deeply than we sometimes realize, because they were the ones who made us believe that goodness was not boring, that a good man, fully and honestly rendered on screen, could be just as compelling and just as heartbreaking as any sinner. Patty Cleary is exactly that kind of man, and Richard Kiley played him with an unshowy, deeply moving decency that provided the entire sprawling, passionate narrative of the Thorn Birds with its moral and emotional foundation. Patty is not the most dramatic figure in the story. He does not conduct a forbidden love affair across decades. He does not scheme for power or wrestle publicly with God. What he does is something quieter and, in its own way, more heroic. He works. He loves his family with a constancy and a tenderness that never wavers. He carries his own private sorrows with a dignity that asks for no recognition and receives very little. He is the kind of father you spent your childhood wishing you had, and the kind of man you spent your adulthood hoping you might become. And Richard Kiley made you feel both of those things simultaneously every single time he appeared on screen. His scenes with Gene Simmons as Fee, his beautiful grief-locked, emotionally unreachable wife, were among the most quietly devastating in the entire production. There is something almost unbearable about watching a man love a woman so steadily and so completely, while she remains just beyond the reach of his tenderness, sealed inside a sorrow he can feel but never fully penetrate.
Kiley played those scenes with an aching, patient love that never curdled into resentment, and that restraint was the mark of a truly great actor at the height of his considerable powers. Because great is exactly what Richard Kiley was,
Across two entirely different theatrical worlds, he achieved a level of distinction that very few performers in any era have managed. On the Broadway stage, he was nothing less than a titan. His Tony Award for Redhead in 1959 established him as one of the foremost musical performers of his generation, but it was his portrayal of Miguel de Cervantes and the delusional, magnificent Don Quixote in Man of La Mancha in 1966 that became the defining achievement of his theatrical life. His recording of The Impossible Dream did not merely become a popular song, it became an anthem, a piece of music so bound up with the idea of noble, quixotic human striving that it is almost impossible now to hear it without feeling something shift in the chest. That is the kind of cultural imprint very few artists ever leave. And yet, for all of that Broadway glory, Kylie was equally formidable as a dramatic actor, and the Thorn Birds gave television audiences the opportunity to witness a complete and consummate performer, operating at the very fullest extent of his gifts. A generation later, an entirely new audience came to know his voice, warm, authoritative, and somehow both thrilling and reassuring all at once. As the narrator of Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park in 1993, it was, in its own way, a perfect final chapter for a man whose greatest gift had always been the ability to make you feel, through nothing more than the human instrument of his voice and his presence, that you were in safe and trustworthy hands. Richard Kiley left us in March 1999, and the loss was a significant one, not just for the world of entertainment, but for anyone who believed in the power of art to illuminate and dignify the quieter forms of human courage. But the warmth and the humanity and the unassuming greatness he brought to Paddy Cleary lingers on, vivid and alive, every single time someone sits down and rediscovers this extraordinary miniseries for the very first time. Shall 7. Philip Anglem, Dane O'Neill. Philip Anglem was born on February 11, 1952, in San Francisco, California. He played the character Dane O'Neill, Maggie's son, and in one of the story's most heartbreaking dramatic ironies, the secret son of Father Ralph de Bricassart, when he was 31 years old in 1983. Currently, he is living happily at the age of 73. Think for a moment about what the role of Dane O'Neill actually demands of an actor. You must be beautiful enough that audiences believe both Maggie and Ralph could have produced you. You must carry a genuine spiritual quality, not the performed piety of a lesser actor hitting obvious notes, but something that feels authentically, quietly sacred. You must be warm enough that people love you deeply and quickly, because the story requires that love to be fully formed and fully real before it tears everything apart. And you must do all of this while playing a young man who is entirely, serenely unaware of the devastating secret at the center of his own existence. That is an extraordinarily difficult assignment, and Philip Anglem met every single one of its demands with a grace and a luminosity that still catches the breath 43 years later. His Dane O'Neill is one of the great unsung performances of the entire miniseries. Gentle, radiant, and heartbreakingly sincere, Anglem gave the character a quality that can only be described as pure. A young man untouched by the ambition and the anguish that have consumed the adults around him, walking toward his vocation and his fate with an open and trusting heart. When Dane is gone, the silence he leaves behind is enormous, and that silence only exists because Anglem made you love the boy so completely and so genuinely that losing him feels like a personal bereavement. It is perhaps no surprise that an actor capable of such delicate, deeply felt work had his roots firmly planted in the theater. Anglem made an extraordinary impact on Broadway with his Tony Award-nominated performance in The Elephant Man in 1979, playing John Merrick with a physical and emotional commitment that left audiences and critics alike shaking their heads in admiration. It was precisely that stage-trained ability to locate the interior life of a character and radiate it outward without artifice that made his Dane O'Neill so quietly devastating on screen. In the years since the Thorn Birds, Anglem has remained devoted to theatrical work, continuing to perform and contribute to the stage with the seriousness and dedication of a man who understood from the very beginning what the craft was truly for. Now, 73 years old, Philip Anglem remains a deeply respected figure of the American theater, and one of the Thorn Birds' most quietly unforgettable gifts. 8. Earl Holliman, Rudy Muller. Earl Holliman was born on September 11, 1928, in Delhi, Louisiana. He played the character Rudy Mueller in the miniseries when he was 55 years old in 1983. Currently, he is living at the extraordinary age of 97. Let us just sit with that for a moment. 97 years old. As 2026 unfolds, Earl Holliman is still here, still present in the world, still a living connection to a Hollywood that most of us only know through the flickering light of old films and the fond memories of those lucky enough to have grown up watching him. There is something deeply moving about that fact, and something that feels entirely appropriate. Because if you have ever watched Earl Holliman work, really watched him, paid attention to the warmth and the steadiness and the quiet decency he brings to every single role he has ever played, you understand instinctively that this is a man the world is simply not ready to let go of yet. Some people earn their years. Earl Holliman has earned every single one of his. His Rudy Mueller in the Thorn Birds is a performance that could very easily be overlooked in the context of a miniseries so densely populated with outsized passions and towering dramatic moments. But that would be a mistake, because Rudy Mueller, kind, dependable, quietly strong, is precisely the kind of human anchor that a story like this one desperately needs. He is the warmth at the edge of the fire, the steadiness that makes the chaos around him legible and bearable. Holliman brought to the role the same deep, instinctive humanity that has characterized his work across more than 7 decades in the industry, an unforced naturalness, a genuine goodness of spirit that no amount of technical training can produce if it is not already there in the person doing the performing. With Holliman, it was always already there. He grew up in Louisiana during the Great Depression, and the hardship of those early years seems to have given him something that never left, a fundamental appreciation for the value of human warmth and a complete absence of pretension or artifice. He made his way to Hollywood as a young man and began building, with patient dedication, one of the most quietly distinguished careers in the history of American film and television. He first came to wide public attention alongside Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster in the 1956 Western gunfight at the OK. A Corral, and that same year earned a Golden Globe Award for his work in the drama The Bachelor Party, a remarkable double that announced his arrival as a performer of genuine range and substance. In the years that followed, he worked constantly and well, accumulating a body of film work that includes some of the finest productions of Hollywood's middle decades. But it was television that made Earl Holliman a fixture in the living rooms and the hearts of American families, and nowhere more so than in Policewoman, the groundbreaking crime drama in which he starred, opposite the luminous Angie Dickinson from 1974 to 1978. As Detective Sergeant Bill Crowley, Holliman brought his characteristic decency and unshowy strength to a role that complemented Dickinson's trailblazing performance perfectly, and the show became one of the defining hits of its era. A generation of viewers grew up with Earl Holliman as a reassuring and beloved presence in their weekly television lives. Beyond the screen, Holliman has devoted enormous energy and passion to the cause of animal welfare, serving as a founding force behind Actors and Others for Animals, an organization that has done genuinely important work in the field of animal rescue and advocacy for decades. It is the kind of commitment that reveals character far more clearly than any award or accolade ever could. Now 97 years old, Earl Holliman is not merely a survivor. He is a living treasure, a man whose long and generous life has enriched this world in more ways than he probably knows. And there you have it, my friends, the extraordinary cast of the Thorn Birds, then and now, 43 years on. What a company of artists they were, and what a work they made together. Some of them are still with us, enriching the world simply by continuing to exist in it. Others have left us, taking their irreplaceable gifts with them into whatever comes next, but leaving behind performances that will be watched and wept over for as long as there are people willing to sit down and let a story break their hearts in the most beautiful possible way. Now, I want to hear from you. Who is your favorite character from the Thorn Birds? What is it about this miniseries that still reaches across 43 years and holds you? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, and please do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell notification so you never miss a single one of these journeys down memory lane. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.